In the strongest possible terms, this egregious display of hatred.
These dangerous fringe groups have no place in American public.
The statement itself is pretty strong and pretty direct about violence, condemning bigotry.
Tensions reach a boiling point with North Korea. The U.S. is preparing to fight and to win.
We're on a collision course with North Korea. President Trump inherited a mess. To all those smart people who are criticizing his rhetoric and his policy, how well did you do?
I've heard folks talking about we being on the cusp of a nuclear war. Seen no intelligence that would indicate that we're in that place.
Al-Qaeda wants to turn your morning commute into a bloodbath. The terror group reportedly highlighting ways to attack American subways in its jihadi magazine called Inspire.
Thomas with the finishing touches.
The winner of the 99th PGA Championship, Justin Thomas.
Well, a beautiful start to this Monday, August 14th, live from Studio F, the mezzanine level. Brian and Ainsley are going to be off all week, and in their place, these two.
You're stuck with us, Steve.
It's great.
You got the weekend all week, Steve.
That's great.
That's kind of a good way to look at August, right?
The weekend all week. It's kind of like breakfast for dinner.
Yeah.
Weekend all week.
It's going to be a fun week. It's going to be a good one.
Indeed.
Well, happy
Thanks for
Monday
having
morning,
us.
everybody.
That's right.
A lot to wake up to.
No kidding. And we're going to start with a Fox News alert right now. Nationwide tensions reaching a fever pitch following Charlottesville, Virginia deadly rally on Saturday.
Anti-protesters turning Washington State's peaceful freedom rally into chaos. As you can see, they're clashing with cops on the streets in Seattle.
The protesters seen armed with axe handles and 2x4s, taunting police, hoping to incite violence. Officers in riot gear forced to use pepper spray and flashbang grenades to keep the anti-protesters separated.
Larry, just stay against the wall.
Three arrested for obstruction and assault. Thankfully, nobody was hurt.
We'll keep a close eye on that today as well. Well, the feds now digging deeper into the Charlottesville attack, the suspect's hate-filled past.
Indeed, this is Vice President Mike Pence makes it very clear the Trump administration condemns all hate groups.
Our own Matt Finn live in Charlottesville, Virginia, where a vigil was held last night for the woman mowed down in that chilling attack. Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, everyone. It is a sad and somber Monday morning here in Charlottesville as this town and the nation comes to terms with what happened here over the weekend. Police say the driver who intentionally drove his car into the crowd here in Charlottesville on Saturday, killing one woman and injuring 19 others, is expected to be arraigned at the district court behind me, charged with second-degree murder. We have a warning of some strong video to show you. Police say that James Field Jr. drove his gray Dodge into the crowds here on Saturday, killing 32-year-old Heather Hayes. This is all related to the white supremacy riots here that Vice President Mike Pence says both he and the president condemn.
We have no tolerance for hate and violence from white supremacists, neo-Nazis, or the KKK. These dangerous fringe groups have no place in American public life and in the American debate, and we condemn them in the strongest possible terms.
There was a vigil held here and other vigils around the country in remembrance of Heather Hayes and also the two Virginia state troopers killed when their chopper crashed while assisting law enforcement. Now, it's not clear if the driver will appear in person or by video at the court behind me. Of course, there are safety concerns if he were to appear in person. He also could be charged with domestic terrorism in addition to the second-degree murder charge, and federal investigators are looking into whether he had any help when he drove his car into the crowds on Saturday. Back to you guys in New York.
All right, Matt Finn live in Charlottesville, Virginia. We thank you very much. Also, the Attorney General apparently has launched an investigation. That's right. And the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, said this was indeed terrorism.
Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of outrage. Democrats, media, outrage. I mean, I was looking at the Daily News this morning. I mean, the title, "The Nazi Trump Will Not Call Out." I mean, I knew right away when he didn't call it for what it was. which a lot of people thought that he should, many members in the Republican Party as well. I knew exactly the direction that the media would take it and the Democrats would take it because it fits into the narrative many of them have had the whole time he's been president, that he supports these types of groups.
No matter what, they were going to say that. But it comes after, first he condemns in the strongest possible terms hatred and bigotry. He salutes the police. He talks about, our country and how we should rally around it. Then yesterday, he came out, the White House came out with a very strongly and specifically worded statement. This is what the White House said in response. They said, the president said very strongly in his statement yesterday that he condemns all forms of violence, bigotry, and hatred. Of course, that includes white supremacists, KKK, neo-Nazi, and all extremist groups, calling them out by name yesterday.
Yeah, and one of the reasons many were upset was because he had used the phrase many sides.
On all sides,
yeah. Problems from many sides. Leaders from both parties seem to say that spread the blame equally between the nationalists, white nationalists, and the counter-protesters, and then that prompted that particular response that you just read right there, which was very specific.
Absolutely. Right. And they should be called out. I mean, when you heard there from the Vice President Mike Pence, when we're talking about these hate-filled groups, I mean, they should be called out for inciting violence, for doing what they did on Saturday. I mean, there's no place for that in this country and for the discourse. And I think it's been clear that no one can stand for that.
And as Mike Huckabee pointed out, when the president made the statement, we didn't know who the driver of that car was. Then we found out who the driver of the car was, and the statement was very specific. I mean, James Alex Fields is obsessed with Hitler and Nazis, which no one in this country would deem okay or demonstrative of large groups of people in this country. But still, the New York Times says his statement is found wanting. If that's not editorializing on the front page, I don't know what is.
Well, it sounds like the President of the United States, he's going to be in transit. He's going to be going down to Washington later today. There's a possibility he could actually have a press conference. I've got a feeling he's probably going to talk about this.
Probably get asked about
you remember a few years ago, the Black Lives Matter movement when Barack Obama was in office. And there were at one point, there were 5 cops that were killed.
Down in Dallas.
Right? Down in Dallas. And just take a look at this flashback.
First of all, I think it's very hard to untangle the motives of this shooter. I think the danger, as I said, is that we somehow suggest that the act of a troubled individual speaks to some larger political statement across the country.
He wasn't actually entirely wrong, but the grace given to him, of course, is never given to President Trump in this. I mean, if you remember, Micah Johnson, who was the shooter, supported the new Black Panther Party, told officers on the scene that he was upset about Black Lives Matter. Yet in that case, we're told, don't untangle the motives. We can't paint one group with a broad brush, which no one should do.
Right. Unfortunately, that happens all too often today, though, right? You have one individual, and that then turns into speaking for a political party, for a much bigger group.
For a president?
For a president. That's when it gets very complicated and problematic.
Speaking of complicated and problematic, let's now turn to North Korea, where, as it turns out, North Korea has recalled their prime ambassadors from the United Nations, from China and Russia. They've been called back to the Home Office, reportedly to talk about figuring strategy, given the fact that it sounds like Kim Jong-un wants to do something else militarily.
That's a rough job, ambassador for North Korea. So recalled back to the mothership to as you said, probably strategize about where to go next. Well, Senator Lindsey Graham had some strong comments about this administration and those calling out their approach on North Korea, asking an important question. Take a listen.
I don't think there's an military action is imminent, but we're on a collision course with North Korea. President Trump inherited a mess. To all those smart people who are criticizing his rhetoric and his policy, how well did you do?
That's a great point.
Spot on, though, right? When you think about where we are today, how we got here, you have to think about the strategies that were used in dealing with places like North Korea. Maybe we weren't as tough. Maybe we didn't speak their language. Maybe we didn't threaten them the way that we've seen President Donald Trump do.
Perfect. Maybe they didn't believe in a credible threat of military force. So sanctions, direct talks, diplomacy, UN resolutions, they're not effective if that regime doesn't believe you would actually follow through on what you say you're going to do.
Right, exactly. So. Mike Pompeo also said, from his point of view as a CIA guy, no imminent threat of nuclear war with North Korea. Also, General Joe Dunford apparently is over in Asia, and he has reported that we are ready for war.
Yeah.
But he supports Rex Tillerson and any diplomat diplomatic effort to make sure that it comes to peaceful.
If you're ready, that's usually the best deterrent to it actually happening, which is what you're hearing from this White House. Well, we're also, this White House is here for 4 years, but there's other people already looking at 2020, one of which is Elizabeth Warren, and she's out. A lot of people speculated she might run in 2016. A lot of speculation she would run in 2020, but she's a far left progressive. What would she do to be viable?
Right, exactly. And so when she was talking to the Netroots convention over the weekend, she made it very clear. Don't worry, folks out there who support progressive themes, because we are not going to be a party of moderates. We are going to go way to the left.
Yeah.
Listen to this.
The Democratic Party isn't going back to the days of welfare reform and the crime bill. It is not going to happen. We are not the gate crashers of today's Democratic Party. We are not a wing of today's Democratic Party. We are the heart and soul of the Democratic Party. We're going to be the people who lead the Democratic Party back from the wilderness and lead our country out of this dark time. Then we can't waste energy arguing about whose issue matters more and who in our alliance should be voted off the island.
Interesting she used heart and soul, because when you think about the Democratic Party today, I feel like a lot of people would say that is what they're missing. What is their heart? What is their soul? What do they stand for? I also feel like she was kind of taking a hit there at the Clintons,
Welfare
right?
reform, crime bill.
Sort of.
She's like, get out of here.
Pretty much.
If that's their lesson of the 2016 election, we need to be more like Bernie Sanders, more like Elizabeth Warren. We'll see how that works at the ballot box in 2020.
Indeed. All right, it is 6:12 now here in New York City. Let's have some news with Jillian.
Good Monday morning. Good Monday morning to you at home as well. Let's begin with a Fox News alert right now. And a manhunt underway after 3 people are gunned down at a racetrack in Wisconsin. Police say the victims were shot at point-blank range near a food vendor at the Great Lakes Dragway just south of Milwaukee. Police have no idea what happened before the shooting. Nearly 5,000 people were at the racing event. No one else was hurt. 2 American soldiers are dead, killed while fighting in Iraq. U.S. military officials say the service members died during combat training operations and not by enemy contact. 5 others hurt in the incident. None of the soldiers have been identified. No further details are available at this hour. One of golf's youngest stars makes a huge comeback. Did you see this? It was the biggest win of his career.
And Thomas with the finishing touches.
Justin Thomas winning the PGA Championship, shooting a 68 in the final round at Quail Hollow in North Carolina. He trailed by 3 strokes heading into the day. It's the 24-year-old's first major tournament win. He jumps to number 6 overall in the world rankings. And by the way, just a second ago, I heard Steve asking, what hole was that? That it sat there for a while on his putt? It was 10. It just sat there. It was
for
sat
10
there.
seconds.
For 10 seconds. And that's going to be the stroke that everybody talks about.
Yeah.
No
And then it dropped. They already wrote on the scorecard. I mean, he was walking away, and then it's like, what?
Pretty awesome.
That's never happened to me.
The winner.
Wishful thinking.
Thanks, Jillian.
Thanks,
Jillian.
All right, coming up on this Monday, is Senator Marco Rubio at the top of a Venezuelan hit list? A shocking report straight ahead.
And Republicans running to take Jeff Sessions' empty seat, trying to capitalize on President Trump's popularity. Scott Rasmussen joins us with the last-minute campaign push in the state of Alabama.
Hello, Scott.
Up next.
Morning.
Constipated? Trust #1 doctor recommended Dulcolax. Use Dulcolax tablets for gentle, dependable relief, suppositories for relief in minutes, and Dulcoes for comfortable relief of hard.
Approved oral combination treatment for HR-positive, HER2-negative MBC.
Well, President Trump's seen a bump in his approval ratings in the wake of his confirmation with confrontation, that is to say, with North Korea. And that has some Republican candidates down in this great state of Alabama, a state Trump won by 30 points, desperately courting his supporters before tomorrow's special election to fill Jeff Sessions' vacant U.S. Senate seat. Joining us now to discuss, Ballotpedia editor-at-large and senior fellow at the King's College, Scott Rasmussen. All right. Scott, let's talk a little bit about the fellas over on the big board. You've got Judge Roy Moore, people remember from the Ten Commandments fight. You've got Luther.
And also same-sex marriage.
Indeed. Then you've got Luther Strange, and then you got Mo Brooks. Tell us about those three guys. They are the top three.
Right, there's 9 guys. Right, there's 9 guys running tomorrow in this first round of a 3-tier election. The top 2 finishers will face off against each other on September 26th, and then eventually there will be an election against a Democrat in December. The 3 of them, Roy Moore, very strong base among social conservatives because of the issues with the Ten Commandments and same-sex marriage and other things. Luther Strange is the incumbent, but he was an appointed incumbent after Jeff Sessions took his current job in the Trump administration. Strange has the bad fortune to be hanging out with Senate Republicans in a time when Alabama voters and Republican-based voters all around the country are mad at Senate Republicans. Mo Brooks was really angling for and hoping that he would get an endorsement from President Trump, because who wouldn't want that endorsement in Alabama? But he didn't get it. Strange got the endorsement. And if he survives tomorrow, and if he goes on to keep his seat in the U.S. Senate, I think it will be because of President Donald Trump. But it depends on what Trump does after tomorrow.
Well, it's interesting because Judge Roy Moore and Mitch McConnell are not ideologically at the same level. So if
that was very tactful.
If he were to become the U.S. Senator from Alabama, he's not going to be working with Mitch McConnell.
No. What he would be is a safe Republican vote. I mean, this is a state that doesn't elect Democrats. It hasn't since the mid-90s as part of the overall conversion of the South. So we would expect a Republican to fill this seat, to be very safe in the seat. And I think Judge Moore would be the biggest headache that you could possibly imagine for Mitch McConnell.
So at the end of the day, tomorrow, who do you think is going to win?
I think Roy Moore will be in the finals, without doubt. Some of the polls suggest it could be close for the second spot. I suspect Luther Strange will get across the finish line. And then in late September, if President Trump continues to endorse and support Strange, I think he'll be the Republican nominee.
All right, stay tuned.
All right, Steve.
Scott, thank you very much. Interesting stuff. Meanwhile, straight ahead on this Monday, the former Vanderbilt professor who studied the movement behind this week's protest and what she found out. We'll discuss. And here we go again. More NFL players following the lead of Colin Kaepernick and sitting for the national anthem.
This program is brought to you by Alzheimer's Association. Start a walk to end Alzheimer's team today.
Welcome back to Fox and Friends. About 25 minutes past the hour. Back with some headlines this morning. More than a dozen illegal immigrants found locked inside of a sweltering tractor trailer right near the U.S. border with Mexico. A relative of someone inside the trailer tipping off police, leading them to a truck stop in Edinburgh, Texas. Police say the 17 immigrants were likely locked inside for 8 or 9 hours. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt. Oof. And a task force wants the city of Tacoma, Washington to spend nearly $500,000 taxpayer dollars to help illegal immigrants. They're proposing a $440,000 legal defense fund to help illegals at a detention center fight deportations. Pete, over to you.
Debbie. Well, you may have heard over the past 48 hours a focus on white supremacists and violent extremism in the wake of deadly protests involving white nationalists in Virginia. But our next guest says there's a fundamental difference between those two groups, and that longstanding issue of nationalism in America is anything but clear-cut between black and white. Dr. Carol Swain, author of The New White Nationalism in America, predicted the rise of these movements 15 years ago, and she joins us now to explain. Professor, thank you very much for being here. I've been very interested to get your take on the events of the day. You studied this in 2002, long before President Trump or President Obama. You noticed something, a movement growing. What did you see and why did it come about?
Well, first of all, what started me on the research in early 2000, there were some high-profile hate crimes where people went out and they were killing people of different races, and that was very alarming. And I commissioned interviews of 10 individuals who represented a wide spectrum of white nationalism. And what I came out with, I called it the New White Nationalism, because there was a new white leader that was well-educated, very articulate, who was not espousing racial violence or using racial epithets, but they were using the language of multiculturalism and identity politics to argue that white was like any other group and that white people were being discriminated against and that white people needed spokespersons. And I knew that they had the potential to expand because they were addressing issues that I think a lot of Americans cared about, but mainstream politicians were ignoring. And so this is very different from the old style white supremacists associated with the KKK and the neo-Nazis. And what I think happened in Charlottesville is that you had the extreme right, the neo-Nazis, the Klanspeople, but you also had some of the newer types who call themselves the alt-right. These are intellectuals who are using social science data, FBI statistics, and science to support their argument. And they say that they are white nationalists. They care about white people as opposed to white supremacists who would say that white people are superior to blacks and Jews and other groups.
Professor, that's really interesting research. And obviously James Alex Fields, who mowed down protesters and professed support for Nazis, is a racist. In your studies, when you talk about the alt-right and you talk about those that may have had grievances that they perceive, would you describe them as universally racist as well?
Here's what I would say is that with the guy that mowed down the protesters, that he clearly was very angry. I don't know if he went to the rally with that purpose, but clearly he acted in a way that created violence. My understanding of the alt-right is that they're making the case that if black people have interests and Hispanics have interests, that white people have interests too. And they're making an argument around civil rights that I believe resonates with a wider population. And I called it the new white nationalism to distinguish it from old-style white supremacy. And I believe part of the solution is to open up dialogue and listen to what people are saying, because by shutting down dialogue, we are making it so that like-minded people are only talking with each other. And just coming out and denouncing white supremacy and painting everyone with the same broad brush does not solve the problem. There are black nationalists, there are white nationalists, there are Hispanic nationalists, and so we can't say it's just one group. So the president was correct when he said that there were many forces involved. Had the counter-protesters not been there, maybe the entire rally would have ended differently. And these are people who are aggrieved over affirmative action, immigration, minority crime, and just what they see as discrimination against white people. If we want to come together, we need to move away from identity politics and multiculturalism and focus on the American national identity. That's the only way we're going to be able to get beyond this.
Very well said. Professor, thank you very much. Professor Carol Swain of Vanderbilt University, we appreciate your insight this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, President Trump keeping another campaign promise, taking the first shot in the trade war with China. What we know about the president's plan next. And caught on camera, Tom Cruise injured while performing a high-flying stunt. Oh! Youch! Didn't quite make it. What we know about the actor's condition this morning. But first, happy birthday to Tim Tebow. He is 30 years old, 30 years young today. There he is on our program with Ainsley Earhardt a couple of months ago.
Progressive gives you options based on your budget. Wow.
Bella, there's another one.
Thank you, VSP.
See the wonder. Keep your eye health the top priority with the VSP Individual Vision Plan.
That's a beautiful
See
one.
better. For life, for less.
These are the faces of arthritis. And when they have pain, they turn to Australian Dream. Here's why they love it.
Australian Dream doesn't burn, and there's no odor.
There's real medicine in there. It's effective pain relief.
I bought it because of the money-back guarantee. I keep buying it because it works.
If you're one of the faces of arthritis, get Australian Dream. It's effective relief for arthritis backed by the empty jar guarantee. Back pain? Try Australian Dream Back Pain Cream. Real medicine, trusted relief.
We are back with a Fox News alert. China in the middle of a trade war. The country says it will stop importing North Korea's coal, iron, fish, and other goods in the coming weeks.
Yeah, this is pretty big news. This is President Trump plans to strike the first blow against China in a trade war with the U.S.
David Lee Miller is live in Bridgewater, New Jersey with the very latest from not far from where the president is right now. David Lee?
That's right. Good morning. And just a few moments ago, the president sent out his first tweet of the day, and he said that he's going to be focusing in the next few hours on the trade and military. Specifically, Mr. Trump is going to be delving into his arsenal, if you will, of tools to address the issue of trade with China. Later today, he's expected to sign an executive memorandum that will authorize the U.S. Trade Representative to investigate if China is stealing U.S. technology. The investigation is going to focus on whether China is forcing U.S. companies to essentially hand over intellectual property in order to do business in that country. The outcome of this investigation could lead to tariffs on Chinese products. Now, the timing of this executive memorandum is getting a great deal of attention. Mr. Trump is calling on China to do more to pressure North Korea to halt its nuclear weapons program. And only on Friday, he spoke with the Chinese president on this very subject. Senior administration officials say that events in North Korea have absolutely nothing to do with Mr. Trump's policy on trade. They say national security and the issue of trade are two distinct issues. Meanwhile, we're hearing from the Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who lashed out at the president, saying, quote, President Trump's pattern continues, tough talk on China, but weaker action than anyone could ever imagine. And also this morning, guys, the Chinese are also weighing in. An editorial in an official Chinese newspaper said that the president's actions could, in the editorial's words, poison the U.S.-Chinese relationship. And you might recall that it was only a little more than a week ago that Mr. Trump was very successful in getting the Chinese on board with a UN resolution, 15 unanimous votes in the Security Council to increase sanctions against North Korea. But now, separately, they're ratcheting up pressure on the subject of trade. Back to you.
No surprise there.
Indeed. All right, David Lee, out in New Jersey. Thank you very much. So while in public, China says, yep, we're going to do everything we promised to in that 15-0 sanctions deal, the United States is going to squeeze them a little harder and say, now, you can apply more pressure to North Korea, can't you, China?
Well, and that's all the experts say. The path to a diplomatic resolution goes through China. And they're not going to do it because they like us. They're going to do it because we give them a difficult reason to do so.
China is the only one that could put this thing to bed. It's about time we start putting a little more pressure on them.
Absolutely.
I think you're right. All right, it is 24 minutes before the top of the hour on this Monday.
Jillian Neely is with some headlines we're following.
It's Monday already. It comes here so quickly.
Well, we've been here all weekend, Jillian, so
I'm sorry. I rest my case. Okay, good morning to you. Let's get you caught up on what you need to know before you leave the house. As tensions reach a boiling point with North Korea, the U.S. is preparing to fight and win. American forces now conducting joint military exercises with Japan, getting ready for anything, although the director of the CIA says we're safe for now.
There's nothing imminent today, but make no mistake about it, the continuation, the increased chance that there'll be a nuclear missile in Denver is a very serious threat, and the administration is going to treat it as such.
This comes amid reports North Korea is calling their ambassadors to China, Russia, and the UN back to the rogue nation for a meeting. Senator Marco Rubio may be on the top of a Venezuelan hit list. The Florida senator has been a harsh critic of the socialist regime. DHS says the threat came from Diosdado Cabello, President Nicolas Maduro's right-hand man. Rubio called him the Pablo Escobar of Venezuela. DHS says details of the assassination plot aren't verified, but they are taking it seriously enough that Rubio's security detail has been beefed up. More football players are standing with Colin Kaepernick by taking a seat during the national anthem. Last night, Seahawks defensive end Michael Bennett sat on the bench with a towel on his head as the rest of his team stood for the anthem at a preseason game. Oakland Raiders running back Marshawn Lynch sat down on Saturday night and ate a banana instead of honoring his country. Tom Cruise's mission? Incomplete. The superstar tries and fails at his own stunts. This TMZ exclusive video shows crews crashing into a building while filming Mission Impossible 6 in London. The actor seen limping after the jump. No word on the extent of his injuries. The 55-year-old is known for doing his own action stunts for movies. That's a look at your headlines on this Monday. I'll send it back to you.
Maybe he's just lost a step, you know?
I actually think it looks pretty cool. You could brag about that. Say, because some people say, does he really do a stunt?
He
Does
actually
not?
does. Thank you, Jillian.
Yeah.
And apparently the producers of the movie say in this movie he will perform the biggest stunt ever in a movie by himself. But it does look like boom when he crashes
Steve,
it.
did
That is right there. That's how you break 5 ribs.
That is.
Steve, did they already do the biggest stunt? Because if they had it now, I'm worried. But they're not going to finish it.
I got a feeling it's in the can, as they say. The film can. All right.
Yeah, Adam Kloss is channeling the weather outside. Could it be more beautiful across the country today?
Yeah, hey guys, you know what? This is looking like a pretty good forecast from coast to coast. In the last several days, there have been places where we've seen some severe weather. Not looking to be the case today. Yes, there'll be some showers and thunderstorms, but large areas looking for a really good one. That's going to be the case here in New York City. Let's take a look at some of those weather maps and see what we're talking about, as we are going to be seeing, yes, eventually some weather moving through the area. This is a system I do want to talk about. This is Tropical Storm Gert. The good news with this one is it's going to be running up along the coast, but never making any sort of impact to the United States. Maybe some additional rip currents along the eastern coast, but this one really not affecting the weather pattern all that much here in the coming days. What are we concerned about a little bit more back in the United States? Well, there's still that monsoonal flow out west. This is not going to be severe weather, but you're seeing a lot of isolated thunderstorms. So that's something folks on the west coast are going to have to pay attention to. But all in all, guys, it's looking like a pretty nice day from coast to coast.
We will take it. All right.
Yes, we will.
Adam, thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Next time he's going to jump from building to building as he reports the weather. Like
Adam
Tom
Kloss
Cruise.
is?
Fantastic.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll see.
Got some
There's a lot of them
plants in
here.
the building. Yeah, maybe on a planter.
Spider-Man.
All right, meanwhile, we showed you the shocking video on Friday. A police officer shot at point blank range.
Take your hands out your pocket! Take your hands out your pocket! Shots fired!
Oh, man, that police officer survived to tell the story and is going to join us live today.
Really looking forward to that. And you've heard politicians calling for minimum wage hikes, but have you ever wondered how much those same politicians pay the very people who work for them? Stuart Varney weighs in on the hypocrisy. Come on in, Stuart.
Shocker. Hello, Stuart.
Excuse me, are you Johnny Bench?
Yes.
Would you mind signing this?
Sure.
And this.
Okay.
And this. And this. And this.
After a long day of signing autographs, Johnny